All right, Harry, it's time for some Arsenal overreactions. Are you feeling a little bit of extra pressure, considering this is an Arsenal edition?
Yeah, I have to say I am. I feel like I have to provide more context to my answers here than I normally would.
I believe that you show context and intelligence at all times, but
I'm sure I will.
The pressure is on, and we're going to throw you some hard ones here, but we will start off with the kind of classic overreaction of the last 2 weeks, the one that has been debated and pulled apart on social media and everywhere else. West Ham, by winning a European trophy, had a better season than Arsenal.
That is nonsense. Absolute nonsense. If you want to finish in the sort of bottom half of the Premier League table, you know, and you think that that's a good season or that represents a good season, then that's one thing. But then to go on and win a competition is great, obviously, but it's not even got the same value as the Carabao Cup, in my opinion. With all due respect, it's the third tier.
Did you win that then? Did you win the Carabao Cup?
No. But the point I'm trying to make here is that had West Ham won the Carabao Cup, would people be still saying this? Maybe they would, because they'd say it's a trophy. But this is a trophy that's been created to give clubs like West Ham an opportunity to win things, which is not something they normally have. So it's not me being bitter or me being facetious. It is one of those things. You know, if you want to play at a lower level and compete in lower level competitions, then of course you stand a greater chance of winning.
Here's what I will say, and there's the reason why I do think West Ham fans have an argument, is of course they would want to finish second. Absolutely. I totally get that. I don't think it's happening anytime in the near future. In 20 years' time, when we look back on this period of time, if Arsenal don't go on to now win titles, and this is seen as like, well, that was the season that kick-started it all, this season is all about potential. Whereas West Ham fans who are now in their 20s, who could live into their 70s or 80s, will probably remember that night like for the rest of their lives.
They will, but that's because they haven't had many glorious nights, which, with all due respect, is something that Arsenal fans have experienced, the glory of winning trophies. And so because it's a rare thing to them, of course, to them personally, it means a lot more. But in terms of what it actually says about their team, does it say that West Ham had a better... Are we trying to say that West Ham have shown themselves to be a better side than Arsenal this season because they won a trophy? Because there's no comparison. And that's the point I'm trying to make. The trophy glosses over what West Ham's actual level has been. They've been dreadful this season. They just about survived from the drop. There's no way you can package that up as being anywhere close to what Arsenal showed this season.
So what I'm hearing is that West Ham fans who said they've had a better season have a small club mentality.
Correct.
Excellent. Arsenal's midfield will be weaker if they lose both Xhaka and Partey and only bring Rice in.
I agree with that. I really do. I think there's a lot of concern now about what happens in that Arsenal midfield, because a lot of us went into the summer expecting Arsenal to build on what they already have, to reinforce, not to rip out and replace. And even if you brought in Romeo Lavia too, who's also being heavily linked with a move to Arsenal, alongside Declan Rice, there's still an argument that Lavia and Rice as a combination weakens the team in comparison to Xhaka and Partey. Because Xhaka and Partey last season were phenomenal. Partey's form went off maybe the last couple of months of the season, I admit that, and he's had injury issues. But there's no guarantee that bringing those two in to replace the current two raises the level, and in which case, what are you doing it for?
I feel like Partey didn't maybe drop off in the last couple of months of the season. I think it went off a bit of a cliff, which is a shame because I thought he had an excellent year prior to that. And Xhaka, this is something you've said to me earlier in the show, but £35 million, hadn't had a good season at Arsenal before this year, was actually a bit of a flop and has had one great season. So we're back to the potential versus actuality argument of, all right, maybe it's weaker day one. Is it weaker 5 months into the season once they've bedded in and are better players?
And I agree with you that in the future, a Rice and Lavia combination could go to a higher level than those two ever achieved. But the point here is that we got so close, we need to bridge the gap. We need to be better tomorrow, not better in 2-3 seasons' time. And that's my worry about this. Those players that we're talking about coming in should be additions. They shouldn't necessarily be replacements for me, because the squad is not deep enough for us to be ripping out key parts of it and putting in sort of younger, sort of untried players in Lavia's case and hoping that they're going to take off.
To borrow some terminology from our American cousins, I think you've raised the ceiling, but you've also lowered the floor. I think you've actually increased the breadth of outcomes for next season. If it works out, I think you are a better football team, but you have taken away that consistency and that depth, like you say. Arsenal should be looking for a goal-scoring, classic number 9 centre-forward, not bringing in Kai Havertz, who is basically the same as Gabriel Jesus.
Everybody wants one of them. Everybody wants an Erling Haaland. But I think what goes unmentioned quite a bit in discussions around Arsenal's forward line is that Gabriel Jesus' style and the things that he brings to the game actually saw a number of other players in the side thrive as a result of that. Look how many goals Martin Odegaard got. Look how many goals Bukayo Saka got. Gabriel Martinelli had never had a season like the one he's just had. And I think a lot of that was down to Gabriel Jesus at times taking the attention away from those guys, creating spaces in which they could operate and work and linking up with them brilliantly. So I think what Arsenal have gone for is let's have multiple players contributing rather than having one focal point. And I think in some ways that's better. So Havertz, he is similar to Jesus, but then it doesn't disrupt your playing style too much when you have to make that rotation. I do still feel like you need what Arsenal more than anything else need, and they're making improvements in the midfield, which is fine, and a centre back to cover the fact that if Saliba were to go down again, or it's about improving, it's about addition, right? Adding alongside him. But if you can get a 15 to 20 goal a season Premier League striker into that team. But do you not think that Gabriel Jesus could have been a 15-goal striker if he went out for 3 months?
Yeah.
Because I think that's another point that people miss.
But I think similarly to Eddie Nketiah, who came in and was brilliant when he first came in, both of them are quite streaky strikers. Now, by that, I don't mean lucky, because they're both actually incredibly hard-working players. Like, I sometimes hear streaky and it sounds like it's a real denigration, but in terms of goal scoring, they're those kind of strikers who'll score 11 in 12 and then none in 13, and then just those kind of players. And
that's fair.
I know that they're very difficult to find, those really consistent, 1 in every 2 type goal scorers. They're very hard to find, but that is, that's what Arsenal should be banging.
Might have one in Balogun.
Oh, here we go. All right, now I'm seeing an overreaction. Right, final one. 0 silverware next season. But qualifying for the Champions League, finishing top 4, should be seen as a failure for Arsenal.
I understand why people would say that. I do, because ultimately you want to win trophies and you want to have those sort of crowning moments at the end of your campaigns. But unfortunately, we're in a time now where qualifying for the Champions League is more valuable than winning the FA Cup or the League Cup. That's just the way it is financially, in terms of your status as a football club. Nobody ever says, I want to join this club because they won the Carabao Cup. But people do say, I want to join this club because they're in the Champions League. So I think the level between the Champions League qualification and winning the domestic cups is widening all the time. And that means we have to recalibrate what we expect and what we deem as success over the course of a season. So I'd like to see Arsenal win a trophy. As a fan, you want the day out, you want the memories, etc. But I don't think the club will necessarily see it like that.
We also have to remember, of course, it's a top 5. I keep saying top 4. It's so ingrained into the personality. Exactly. I mean, you know that as an Arsenal fan, when top 4 is a trophy after for so long. But man, the fact that it's 5 English teams going to the Champions League now because our coefficient is so high is astonishing. So, look, I do think that is going to be I still think that's got to be back to that thing. That's got to be the floor of the season. The minimum has to be get back to the Champions League again.
Agreed.
But for me, and this maybe this comes back a little bit to the West Ham conversation. If I'm you, I'm taking finishing 4th and winning a trophy over finishing 2nd and not.
I think going into next season, probably yes. But I think Arsenal fans needed something that was going to prove to them this time around that they'd taken steps forward under Mikel Arteta. And the only thing that was going to be convincing enough was to maintain a strong league position. Because ultimately, that's where you can tell how good a side are, how able they are to maintain their Premier League's sort of level. It's the hardest competition that any of our clubs play in, and Arsenal were the 2nd best. So I think that showed the progress. But now, you want to see any progress crowned off with trophies. Otherwise, what's the point?
Pushing on is what we need.